Hi, this is my case study on A Good Teacher Turns Bad. Mrs. Wilson is the principal at Crestview Elementary, and Mrs. Horton is a first grade teacher. She's a former Teacher of the Year, and recently, since spring break, she's had a change in attitude and behavior. A lot of parents are complaining, some even called the superintendent to get their kids out of their class. Mrs. Wilson tries to talk to Mrs. Horton, and that does not go well. So as far as the problem, Mrs. Horton seems pretty angry, and it seems like it's coming out in her teaching, and a lot of parents and students aren't happy about being in her class. Some of her behavior verges on being very unprofessional. As far as what I know, again, Mrs. Horton is a former Teacher of the Year in that same district. She's had some things going on, and her behavior and attitude have changed, and parents want kids out of her class. What I need to know is, have observations already been done in Mrs. Horton's class? Did she have after their failed parent conference, did Mrs. Wilson have a conversation with Mrs. Horton? And then has Mrs. Wilson talked to any students to find out what their impression is and how they're doing in Mrs. Horton's class? And then what's the plan moving forward? As far as my plan of action, first, I think I would speak with Mrs. Horton about all of the concerns and see what she has to say, and keep all that data and organize all the information that I already have and add this conversation to it. And then depending on what Mrs. Horton's reaction is, I might contact Human Resources to see what the plan of action might be. As far as resolving the issue, I wondered if maybe Mrs. Horton didn't realize how bad things have gotten. Maybe she is in a bad state of mind and just doesn't even realize how bad it really is. I, as the principal, might be able to put a plan in place myself and work with Mrs. Horton to improve things through observations or discussions. If things don't get better, I'll have to move to the HR plan. And then what is best for students is Mrs. Horton going back to the teacher that she was, if we're going to have her remain in that building. As far as what I was thinking throughout the case study, I just kept thinking of teachers that I have seen in situations like this. Sometimes they're moved to other buildings and the situation improves. Sometimes they just resign, either on their own or with suggestions from administration. I was also thinking that curriculum shouldn't suffer because a teacher's going through a bad spot in her life. And the case reinforces how important the student-teacher relationship is. If students aren't comfortable with the teacher, they don't do as well most of the time. As far as unresolved issues, I'd like to know if Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Horton were able to work out a plan, an improvement plan in the building. Did Mrs. Horton have to go on out of cycle or intensive evaluation? And were students actually moved out of her room? And what was the reaction of other teachers when that did happen? As far as promoting the academic success of every student, I feel like I acted and started working on a corrective plan as soon as I started hearing from parents, and the superintendent let me know that some parents had contacted the school board. Mrs. Wilson had done some observations to ensure that the curriculum was still being taught, and what she also needs to do is make sure that teachers are implementing the pilot reading program as it should be. How did I promote the personal well-being of every student? I need to make sure that students are in a safe and secure environment. So I need to check on students. If any students were moved, make sure that they're doing well in the class that they were moved to. I need to help Mrs. Horton make the relationships with her students better, to make a better learning environment. And then somehow, without giving any personal information, trying to assure the parents that a plan is being put in place so that their children aren't afraid to go to school. How do I, as a school leader, enhance instructional capacity? What I might do for Mrs. Horton is get a grade level teacher to pair with her to plan. Again, make sure teachers are implementing the pilot reading program with fidelity. And maybe something that has been done in my school district is walkthroughs. So I could create a walkthrough calendar to see that what all teachers are doing in their classrooms, so that I'm more familiar with curriculum and what happens in each grade level classroom to compare to another same grade level classroom. That is my case study for EDL 851. Thank you for watching.